ויקרויה בהם הכתוב, ויקרויה בהם הכתוב, כי אדוני אלוהיכם ההולך עמכם להילחם לכם עם אויביכם להושיע אתכם, ונאמר אמן. הוא יברך את חיילי צבא ההגנה לישראל, הוא יברך את חיילי צבא ההגנה לישראל.
Quand je danse en cadence, j'ondule au ciel, je souris. Avec 2 heures de nonchalance, je suis une bombe d'énergie. Je m'enroule et je me déhanche, j'éclipse tous les mots de ma vie. Je chante, je vrille, je plie, je m'accroupis, je traverse la Manche, je me débranche, je décolle. Je chante, je ris, je connais plus personne. Sur tambour et trompette qui détonne, arrivent les pensées qui sourient. Je pourrais danser sur lui. Pour ennui, changer de paysage, un voyage. Ce soir, je te reviens, je m'abandonne.
Si bailo la luna me miran y se enamora de mí. Me muevo y se paran el tiempo y el duende empieza a salir. En la oscuridad mi baile tiene luz. Allá en la oscuridad mi baile
מרגישה שנפתח לה מזל, פגשה אחד גבר ורז'ל, והיא תלחש לו, מה היא תלחש לו? קח אותי על הגמל. I'm your beauty, you're my beast, welcome to the Middle East. תל אביב, יא חביבי תל אביב, תסתכל כמה לירדים מסביב, עושים לי היי היי בלילה וואי וואי, וסחטן על תל אביב. תל אביב, יא חביבי תל אביב, תסתכל כמה לירדים מסביב, עושים לי היי היי בלילה וואי וואי, וסחטן על תל אביב. זורחת שמש בעיר הלבנה, ונועצים בו מבט מכל פינה, והיא יודעת, מה היא יודעת, הוא יברח לה עוד שנייה. I'm your beauty, you're my beast, welcome to the Middle East. תל אביב, יא חביבי תל אביב, תסתכל כמה לירדים מסביב, עושים לי היי היי בלילה וואי
probably don't need the microphone. Oh, live streaming. Oh, it's live streaming. We good? Good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us for what promises to be a very highly informative and engaging discussion around the upcoming elections. I'm Adrienne Jacobson, in case nobody knows me, and I'm the chairperson of the Cape South African Jewish Board of Deputies, and it's a pleasure for us to be hosting this Elections 2024 discussion. So a very warm welcome to everyone in the auditorium and this evening, as well as all of those who've joined us online via Facebook and YouTube. So the board seeks to educate our community and those around us on the importance of the elections and why we all should be voting on May the 28th. The Freedom Charter, which is 29th. Okay. Viv, it's our thing on the 28th, sorry. You can see how important. I knew that something was happening on the 28th. So I think one of our most important and beloved democratic documents that came out of the birth of South Africa is the Freedom Charter. And it stated that South Africa belongs to all those who live in it. So we as South African citizens really have a duty to uphold the constitutional structures that have been so hard won and to determine democratically who governs our beloved rainbow nation. We can only contribute to change and make this country great by having our say, being active citizens, and making the hope and dream expressed in the Freedom Charter a reality. So tonight is really a series of events, of initiatives that we've organized, and I hope that we'll all really learn much from the information being shared. It's really a rare privilege to welcome our guest speaker, Wayne Sussman from Joburg. Wayne is one of the most foremost political analysts in the country, and it's been an incredible privilege, Wayne, to be working with you since I took my term of office. I remember having a discussion with Karen and Wendy to say, one of the things that we really want to achieve around the table is just to have regular political debriefs so that we can really understand. So she said, gee, I got someone fantastic for you. This is somebody that if somebody coughs in Mpumalanga, he is going to tell you what the voter's roll looks like in Pofadder. And I promise you she was not wrong. Wayne's depth of insight and analysis is incredible. And I mean, it's fantastic Shabbos table when you're sitting around, suddenly one of the things that he's told us pops up. So Wayne, thank you so much for educating us and for taking us on a journey and for letting us have that access to your incredible mind. Facilitating Wayne is and I've been told no less than 5 adjectives to describe our executive director. Incredible, competent, insightful, and amazing and fantastic. Is that good? No, we have our amazing Daniel Bloch, our executive director. So enjoy the discussion, everyone. And Daniel, over to you.
Thanks so much, Adrian, and welcome to everyone in the audience. Great to have those of you here and everyone online on Facebook and YouTube. Wayne, welcome. How are you?
Is that in the email or the question? I'm very, very well. It's really great to be here. This feels like home to see people like Viv Anstey, Lester Hoffman, people I've known for so many years, Simon Solkis, who I'm connected to distantly by marriage. It's lovely to see one of my wife's favorite Yiddishists, Jonathan Silk, people I've known for many, many years. It's lovely to be here. Thank you so much.
Great, thanks, Wayne, and thanks for bringing the cold weather from Joburg. So we happy.
But I was told not to be too granular tonight, and then Adrian throws in Pofadder and Mpumalanga. I'll try to restrain myself and not get too granular.
Okay, so as Adrian said, Wayne's been talking to the board and giving us updates on the political climate and what to expect from the election. So tonight we're going to try and stick to, there's a lot to get through in 90 minutes. There's a lot of burning questions to get through that you and I have discussed, and a number of logistical questions to cover. Wayne was on ENCA earlier today, then he went on a radio interview, and now he's here. So very busy man, and I think everyone's looking forward to hearing your insights who the big movers and the shakers are, and what to expect from the elections. So also we want to encourage from the audience, if you do have questions, we will come to you and ask you for questions. I don't think Wayne's going to tell you what's happening in Pofadder, if I'm wrong.
It's not consequential, but in Mpumalanga is consequential.
Okay, perfect. So I think, Wayne, before we get to the two burning questions, which I know everybody will want to ask, we're going to keep you in suspense, and also so that you stay till the end. We're going to start with what are going to make these elections different from the past 30 years?
Thank you, Daniel. So I was speaking at a lunch yesterday of highly successful individuals, and many of them did not know that there's going to be a third ballot or what this third ballot is in this election. So let's start off with that. The third ballot is for two basic reasons, and I could go on, but I'll keep my answer short. The first is that this is where independence will be. So you've seen the picture, the post of Zaki Ahmed. He isn't going to be, no independent will be on the national ballot. So let's take one step back. You in the city of Cape Town, you've always had two ballots, whether it's a local election where you vote for the ward council, the PR councillor, or in a national election where you vote for the national ballot or the provincial ballot for the Western Cape. Rural voters, though, have had three ballots. They always get three ballots because of something called a district vote. So they're more accustomed to what's going to be happening. But millions of South Africans will be stepping into the ballot and be surprised when they see three ballots with different colors. So 200 seats are going to come from the national ballot, okay? And you can study the lists, all the major parties. I always say this, you've got to look at lists as who's likely to represent you. You know Cyril Ramaphosa will be in Parliament. You know John Steenhuisen will be in Parliament. You know Julius Malema will be in Parliament. But look at the people down the list because they could have a consequential role in the future direction of this country. So historically, there's 400 people who you voted for with your national ballot. Now, you are only voting for 200 people on that national ballot. And then there's this regional ballot. I forget, I think it's between 19 and 21. To be honest, I've forgotten something. But I think it's 19. The people in the Western Cape will be sending 19 people, essentially, to Parliament or with your regional vote. Okay? So the DA will have a separate regional list. The ANC will have a separate regional list. Some people might be on the same list, but this is, and 200 people. So the Northern Cape will have 5, I think the Western Cape has 19, Gauteng has 47. It's in proportion to the size of the population. If Gary Anstey had his way, because he loves hiking the Northern Cape so much, 50 people come from the Northern Cape, but there are not that many people, only 5 people from the Northern Cape. So that's the first thing, what makes this election different. And within that, as I said, with Zaki Ahmed, there are independents running. So the first spoiler alert from our conversation is that I think Zaki Ahmed will do the best out of all the independent candidates. I don't think any independent candidate will make it in Parliament because it's much harder for an independent candidate to get in Parliament than it is for a party like Al Jamaa, which got in with 31,000 votes last time and 0.18% of the population. Because he can only get in, or independents can only get through the regional ballot. So I think it's not going to be spoken much the day after the election. But, and again, I must be careful to hold myself back, I think the most significant thing, new thing in this election after the regional ballot, are special votes, Daniel. So historically, on election day, if you were in Cape Town and you needed to go to Hermanus and you could prove that you were registered in the Western Cape, you'd still get both ballots. This time round, you have to vote at your own voting station, okay? So if you're registered at Sea Point Primary, you have to vote at Sea Point Primary. Until tomorrow, by the way, you can apply to vote elsewhere. If you don't do it by tomorrow, it's game over. In voting another station. But what have we seen? And this is why I always pay very close attention to the numbers. This time round, there are 1.6 million. And I'm not even getting to not voting at a voting station. I'm talking about people who are sick or infirm or cannot be at their voting station on election day, who will vote the 2 days before the election. 1.7 million people. This is a game changer. It's very hard for me to make sense of this right now, who it'll favor. I have some ideas. Let me give you some examples quickly. The Western Cape is about 80% higher than last time round compared to people who applied for special votes. We go to KwaZulu-Natal, it's 180% higher. Gauteng, 150, but the big surprise is the Eastern Cape. The Eastern Cape is about 12% of the national voters' roll in this election. It's very important to focus on the voters' roll. If you're not on that voters' roll, you cannot participate in this election. The Eastern Cape's 12%. The Eastern Cape's proportion of special votes is 17%. That's a significant difference. I'll give an example. The Gauteng is less. Gauteng is 24%. They're only about 20% of the voters' roll. They're only 20% of special votes are from Gauteng. So I think this favors the ANC. But let me, because they're very dependent on the Eastern Cape, I might speak more about the Eastern Cape later. Daniel, I'm going to give a 90-minute answer. I won't give a 90-minute answer.
Don't have 90 minutes for
so
one
I think
answer.
I'm joking. These are the main differences. Pay attention to the special vote. That is going to have a big consequence to this election. Independent candidates and the 3 ballots. Okay.
Okay. Well, leading on from what you said, you made a point about knowing where to vote. So to tell all the viewers and most online, if you go to our Facebook page and you go to the Electoral Commission page, we posted the links to find out. You type in your ID and you can find out where your voting station is. Very important. Please don't go to the wrong one. I've done that before. It's not fun. So check that out. You also mentioned, and it's a question that's come up in various conversations. People are saying, where do I give my vote? I'm not going to ask you who to vote for, but where do I give my vote? How will it matter? You know, there's all the new parties that have come up. How will they get into parliament? You mentioned Al Jamar, 31,000 votes to get 1 seat. On average, how many several thousand votes do the smaller parties now need when you look down the ballot to get into parliament and actually make a difference?
So I think it's 36,000 votes this time, but for independents, and it's different, it's far more. It's 76 to 90,000 votes in the Western Cape. I think Zaki Ahmed will need. But 36,000 votes. So that's very difficult. I mean, Al Jamar, there's always a remainder, there's a left. It's very easy. There's a formula, but essentially there are 400 seats in parliament. So you need 0.2, for one of the national seats, you need 0.5%, because half the 400 seats and the 200 seats in the national list. So it's quite easy to work out. Yeah. So I think 36,000 votes will get you a seat this time if you're lucky. Yeah.
Okay, so everybody needs to really take note of who's on the ballot paper and which parties to vote for and who's actually going to make a difference with that particular vote, this particular election.
So I'm preparing for election the morning after the election on ENCA, and I've been going through every municipality, and I'm a sucker. I'm a sucker, including Pofadder. And it's quite amazing. And first of all, it's the strength of our democracy to see so many parties that they have the ability to run. But you go through major metros where, like in the last elections, particularly in some of the rural provinces, the ANC, the EFF, the DA, and the Freedom Front. And then essentially, there's facts on the top. I think there are 20 odd municipalities in Limpopo. In only 3 other municipalities did another party get 1%. And they were 1% once. So often it's like 0.02, 0.01. And it's great. I mean, you're going to have the longest ballot in history. It's going to be confusing in the Western Cape. It's going to be confusing nationally. This is also slightly different. There are over 50 parties on the national ballot, okay? So when you're going to, like, I know you've all practiced folding your ballot paper. It's a different fold this time because it's 2 columns, almost like holding up like Moses. But it's literally a document with 2 columns because there's so many parties this time around.
Wow. Okay, yeah. So brush up on your origami skills.
So just a very quick, amazing fact. The Free State province has, in its history, this is our 7th election, has only ever had 4 parties in the provincial legislature. So it's quite hard. There's never been less and there's never been more than 4 parties. Guess how many parties are running in the Free State provincial legislature for the elections?
You get an extra bagel outside if you guess.
You get a free bottle of Cafe Reserve water. Just take a guess. 27 parties. 27 parties for 30 seats.
Wow. And
in history, no more than 4 parties ever made it to the legislature.
Wow. So
people are on a wing and a prayer and a hope that they can get in. I think there are going to be a lot of disappointed people the day after the election.
Okay. And now another thing that crops up in discussion in our communities, the international vote. And you were on ENCA earlier about just after 4, and I was just astounded. You mentioned 110 voting stations
Yes.
around the world.
Yes.
And you mentioned a number of countries, and one of them with London, where the single largest voting station, 24,000.
Yes.
And back in Joburg, I think the largest one is like what, 5,000?
3, 4, 5. There might be an exception, but it's like 3, 4,000 in Cape Town, in a large urban area. So this is a big challenge on election day. So London is the only place in the world where, not for special voting purposes, where people get to vote over 2 days because they simply can't process so many people. It is far larger. I mean, there are more people voting in London. There are probably 12 times more people voting in London than the entire population of Pofada. So who's not even registered to vote. So there we brought Pofada into the conversation. And the next biggest is The Hague. I mean, by the way, this data is quite fascinating. It shows where our country is living. The UAE was pretty high, which makes sense. There are only 3 missions which will not be voting, and that is Tel Aviv, Khartoum, and Kiev. Kiev. So, and I know that there are a lot of people in Israel who want to register to vote, who could register to vote, and will not be able to participate. I think more than Sudan and probably Ukraine. So yes, that's very, very, very interesting. Yes.
But those in Israel can go to Ramallah, apparently.
Ramallah, Amman, or Cairo would be the nearest, but I don't think many will.
Yeah.
But this is far more who've registered previously. 78,000 votes is potential voters is a hell of a lot. And by the way, you'll see, and I know some members of the Cape Town community who will be voting this weekend. Each party, there are 111 missions. Parties will try to get observers, expatriates in those missions to act, observe the election to make sure it's free and fair. It's a massive logistical undertaking.
And just the numbers in previous votes, which of the political parties have gained more from those international votes?
Yeah, I was at the IEC ROC, which you call the Results Operations Center, when the Freedom Front were the party which were instrumental in getting the votes. And I remember watching Peter Mulder's face. He was the leader of the Freedom Front then when the votes came in. Because he did, to be honest, he did the work, and he must give credit. He got like 5 or 10% of the vote. The DA won it hands down. The DA have been campaigning overseas, certainly in London, and they've got websites for their overseas voters. Nomvula Mokonyane, the ANC, wanted to go to London, but I don't think she's going to have the time. So people are taking it seriously. It's a big catchment of votes, certainly in London.
Okay. Sure. Well, I think we've delayed the inevitable questions long enough. So the 2 burning questions. Can Man United win the Premier League? And will they win the FA Cup?
You mustn't ask me soccer questions. You can ask me rugby or boxing questions, but not soccer questions.
Okay. Will the Stormers win the Rugby Championships?
Probably not.
Okay, great. Moving on then. So the 2 burning questions that I think everybody wants to know. I just want a yes, no, or needs more detail.
Okay.
Will the DA win the Western Cape?
The DA will be the leading. It needs more detail. The DA will be the leading party, but they're stressing right now.
Okay.
They're
We'll get to that.
Okay.
And the second burning question: will the ANC win the national vote?
Compared to 2 weeks ago, they're in a better position today, but it needs more detail.
Okay, so tell us, we're living in Cape Town, in the Western Cape. What is going to happen? There's been a lot of movement in the Western Cape, a lot of newer parties coming up, like the Patriotic Alliance we've seen. I think they won the Neisner Award. And George.
Yes.
Close enough. They're next to each other, aren't they? Yeah.
George Oates, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there are a lot of other movers and shakers. So what's happening in the Western Cape?
Sure.
What's going to be the result after May 29th?
So the 2 big unknowns, which is weaving, but the Western Cape is one of them. The DA's biggest concern right now is Gayton McKenzie and the Patriotic Alliance. This is a very gifted politician who's a masterful orator. He's been a masterful orator for many years. He's relatable to people. And even though he comes from the Free State and comes from the north of the country, he is making an inroads in a province like the Western Cape. The $1 million question is, can he breach what I like to call the blue wall? Now, historically, Malmesbury isn't just famous because people bray over there, and it's not just famous because it's one of the best wine-producing areas, not just famous because it's grain country, Bokomo country. It was where the DA was historically the strongest. There was a stronger DA area than Cape Town. We saw a by-election recently where PA beat the DA there by 28 votes. Very narrow contest, but they shocked the DA. It was a major upset. And Gayton McKenzie, someone who is one of the two big X factors. The others, the MK party, which you're going to get to. But these are, for me, the three big unknowns in the election are Gayton McKenzie, Jacob Zuma, and turnout. And they're all related somehow. So I think we also, a bigger theme of this is that we're in a time of fragmentation right now. I spoke about the longest ballot paper ever. In the 24, I promise you I'm going to get to the Western Cape, Daniel. No. But I think this background's important. In 2014, it was the ANC, the DA, and the EFF. In 2016, in the local government elections, the ANC and the DA and the EFF. In 2019, you saw South Africans, white Afrikaans South Africans, vote for the Freedom Front, who had their best ever elections, I think, since 1994. And you saw the IFP win back some lost ground. And what did that tell us? That Zulu-speaking South Africans were saying, we want to, increasing numbers of Zulu-speaking South Africans were saying, we want someone which looks like us, speaks like us, and is relatable to us. And white Afrikaans South Africans were saying, the DA no longer represents us. We want someone who looks like us, speaks like us, and can relate to our issues. And now here's the segue. In 2021, we saw the emergence of a party like Action SA in Johannesburg, which purported to represent, and did very well, by the way, in areas of Soweto and in white suburbs as well. But the second theme of that election was a continuation of what we saw in 2019. More and more South Africans saying, we want something which looks like us, speaks like us, and is relatable to us. And Gayton McKenzie rides that train. He becomes the mayor of the Central Karoo municipality, and he starts tapping in. By the way, there are very few voters there, and this is what makes his continued rise successful. So I think that is the DA's big concern. It's far bigger concern than any other matter. By the way, Gayton McKenzie will also hurt the ANC. The ANC is traditionally very reliant on the rural coloured vote. You saw in Oudtshoorn recently, Gayton McKenzie's Patriotic Alliance smashed the ANC in a pretty safe ANC seat. So for me, what's going for the DA is this. Okay, I love throwing out statistics. Do you know what percentage, and the Cape Board of Deputies should know this, what percentage of voters in the Western Cape are in the city of Cape Town? Just take a guess. Mr. Asher? 63%. Oh. You contrast that with the Eastern Cape, which I really hope, because I can show off when I speak about the Eastern Cape. The Eastern Cape has two metros, Nelson Mandela Bay and Buffalo City. Together, they only make up 29% of the Eastern Cape. So this is there are huge numbers of voters, almost two, and of actual voters, it'll probably be 2/3 on election day because people in the cities vote. So we just do not have the data to know what Gayton McKenzie is going to do to the DA in the city of Cape Town. But some data we do have is that over a 5-year period, and as you heard, I focus on the voters' roll quite strongly, in the city of Cape Town, in 9 out of the 10 safest DA seats was the highest increase in voter registration. So that is what helps you in an election if you get your supporters to register. The DA has done that, but in that they have a major challenger in Gayton McKenzie. The DA also, another concern for them, starts with G and ends with E, is George. This building disaster, which is a national tragedy, it's a very sad thing. But as long this hasn't, it's absolutely terrible, but from a DA perspective, this is a DA-run town. The Premier of the Western Cape comes from the town next door. So these are some of the stresses the DA will have in the next few days. But let me just give some insight. I think it's, so as I said, Gayton McKenzie, and we're going to speak about MK soon, affects the DA, the ANC, but also parties like Good. Good did pretty well in the last election. I don't think Good can compete with the Gayton juggernaut. So and other parties like the National Coloured Congress, the Western Cape. He's all-encompassing. Okay.
But that's why, as we spoke earlier about percentages.
Yeah,
And
sure.
in the last elections, you're probably looking at the top parties in the Western Cape was DA, which had about 62% plus
54%.
minus 54.
Yes.
This year you mentioned they could be dropping.
Yes.
You had the ANC, then EFF, and then you had Good, Freedom Front, ACDP.
Yes.
So you're saying Patriotic Alliance is going to crack that top 6? Potentially.
Without a shadow of a doubt. Okay. But look, he filled up Athlone Stadium. So I'm involved in this. I'm a referee and a player. I'm involved in the Mark Data opinion poll, which will be released on ENCA on Sunday. In many opinion polls, he's not showing up, and that worries me because I trust the methodology. It doesn't make sense. He's winning by-elections. A place like George is the third most populous place in the Western Cape. It's not a backwater. There are lots of voters in George. But why is he not showing up in opinion polls? So I think the DA will certainly be the leading party, but they might need a coalition partner. It's just one of those unknowns.
So then the coalition,
Yes.
we'll get to that in a moment. The multi-charter party.
Multi-party.
The multi-party charter. There's about 11 parties involved in that.
Yes.
How's the DA is the DA going to lean on that particular charter to push through in other parts of the country?
Well, they might need it in the Western Cape. So it's like the ACDP have been in the provincial legislature in every election, and the Freedom Front will certainly win a seat again, and maybe Action SA will win a seat. We don't know. So I do think the DA will continue, but we just do not know how far Gayton McKenzie can go. Let me give you an example of Eldorado Park in the south of Johannesburg. This used to be a pretty DA stronghold. In that area, he wins it now by a landslide. You literally see, it's not often in South Africa, for those who've heard me speak with John Math, Molester Kivet, politics is often about margins. What he's done in the coloured communities in the north of the country is often landslides. Can he do that in the Western Cape remains to be seen.
And we heard on the radio the other day that he was talking about he's in a firm partnership, he said it, with the ANC. So is there any chance of the Patriotic Alliance doing anything with the DA in the Western Cape?
Yes, so this is interesting. The DA have taken a very firm position against it because he's eating their lunch. They will say to you that he is unsavory character, that he's unreliable, that he, in places like Cape Town and Nelson Mandela Bay, he's been an unreliable partner. But I think parties like Action SA would like to work with him. But I look at this stage, I think it'd lean to whatever would be the best deal for him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Before we move on, does anybody have any burning questions right now? Okay, well, Mike, and then Gary, and then Rel. We'll see what they
Michael
are.
Barr, wow. The last time I saw you was under the blue gum trees at Harbonim Camp. Okay. Milkwood. Okay.
Okay, Mike, you can ask the question and we'll repeat it. So for the viewers online, the question is, what's so bad about Gayton McKenzie? You like him. He's a nice guy. Okay.
No, so I think you've just raised a very good point. Why does he resonate with people? So yes, he did time in jail, but he said he uses that experience to turn his life around. He really taps into key moments, and this is his political growth has been those key moments. When there have been sad crime incidents or drug incidents in the south of Johannesburg, he sees on those moments and the communities turn to him. The community said the big parties have failed us. He's unapologetic of what he stands for. He is who he is. And I think all these things, Michael, like with you, resonate with a growing number of South Africans. I think for some, the fact that he did time in jail, the fact that he's changed between the ANC and the DA, that turns some voters off. Okay.
I do think if you watch his interviews, and the recent one he's done on the ENCA, he's done a lot of town hall debates, is when you ask any other politician a question, what color is the sky? Well, it's complicated, there's different shades, the sun, the clouds. Gayton McKenzie just says it's blue. And then he's, like you said, he's unapologetic about it. And I think a lot of people are attracted to that kind of quality where he just speaks directly and doesn't actually care what anyone thinks.
Correct.
Yeah. Gary, and then Rael.
Can you please explain to me use the example, we've got 200 national seats that we vote for, that's easy. We have the independent standing, but you mentioned there's a threshold, that you may need 60 or 70,000,
Yes.
and maybe only one person in Cape Town might just hit that threshold. What happens to the other 200 seats? Or does that just get allocated proportionally to the parties based on the 200, or what happens?
On the regional ballot, okay? So they'll add up all the votes on that regional ballot. It'll be in a they'll sort the ballots, and they're just like they count the provincial ballots, okay? So they're going to count those regional ballots, and then with the normal formula, allocate those 19 Western Cape seats. So let's say the DA gets 50%, then it's 9.5 seats, okay. If the ANC gets 30%, so that's the way. Does that answer your question? But I mean, if an independent, like a small party, doesn't get in, those votes will be wasted, remainders, yes.
I just want to say, Gary, you got Wayne to stumble slightly. I haven't seen
Yes.
you stumble. So if anybody else can get Wayne to stumble in his answer or get him to think twice, there's a prize at the
That's
end.
good. Okay.
Rael, you got a question?
How important is, when somebody goes to the ballot, how important is governance and delivery versus politics? Because it would seem to me, and I think to a rational person, that there's no doubt, based on fact, that the DA is governing the best compared to other parties in other areas, municipalities, provinces, etc. So at what stage, I mean, why would people choose to vote for another party? You get the question. Do the politics trump actually making sure that our water runs and the electricity works and that the city gets cleaned? And built into that question is, are we living a misreality? In other words, is it true that where we live in the traditional white areas, that the DA does deliver better than it does in the traditionally underprivileged areas?
Yeah.
And then the second question I've got to just throw it in: how important and what impact will the Middle East have in terms of the DA losing a coloured Muslim vote, which I assume would normally go to the DA?
Well, that's my one question gone. Thanks.
Okay, so look, as I said earlier, the secondary trends. The big trend, which I didn't speak about in 2019, was the growth of the EFF. Okay, that was a major trend. But these secondary trends, the secondary winners in the previous election, this idea of identity, this idea of history, I think looms very, very large. So yes, the DA can speak about Auditor General's reports and speaks about low corruption and service delivery, etc. But I think lived experience, culture, identity, history, people finding that the party might be tone deaf on certain matters, does count against the DA and possibly some other parties, some other parties in South Africa. I think it's and also look, in this election, there have been very few discussions about policy. I mean, the job numbers came out recently, which are devastating for this country and the future of this country. It's gone up again. But I think for the media, it's easier to cover the flag issue. So these are some of the challenges. There have been very few policy debates and discussions in this election. And I think these are some of the challenges the DA will find. It's also, do you want to represent me? So, for instance, if people have a perception that all black leaders leave the DA, I think might hurt the DA amongst black voters. So these are some of the challenges. Politics is not easy, and that's why I give credit to parties, even though they've stumbled in many ways, like the ANC, the DA, and the EFF, and the Freedom Front, and the IFP have done these rodeos before. It's egos, it's the country misunderstanding you or not understanding you correctly, it's social media. I don't know if I'm answering your question, Rael, but I think it's a very, very difficult thing. It's not just about service delivery. And by the way, the service delivery, you do see the DA do better in local government elections than national elections. I just think for the ultimate prize, some people remain very, very critical of the DA and other parties in that juncture. So the Middle East, that's not for me one of the three most burning issues in this election. So I do think what the issue will do is energize activists, to energize activists, to make sure that parties which represent the Palestinians or who are pro-Palestinian, they will go out in the last 13, 12 days and try to convince as many people as possible to vote for particular parties, whether it's the ANC, the EFF, Marius Fransman's party, etc. It remains to be seen what will happen in the ballot box. When one looks, and I've spoken about this for many times, there is Rylands and Gatesville in the Western Cape. This is where Dula Omar comes from, ANC royalty. The ANC won that ward for many times, but the DA has represented that ward now for a number of years. I do think the DA are going to suffer losses in a community like that in this election. But let's take the National Health Insurance Bill. I think there are middle-class Muslims who will have great concerns about that. I think that Muslim South Africans, just like other population groups, care about a multitude of issues, whether it's crime, the future, the economy. So I think the issue is going to loom less large than people anticipate, but maybe I'll eat my words after Election Day. I just think there are too many other issues.
Thanks, Wayne. One more, just Linton, yeah? Okay, Oshi?
Wayne, can I just ask you this question? It arises from a poll which I saw today, where they predict the ANC will go to 40%, the EFF will lose from I think 18, go down to 11, the DA will get about 21%, and the remaining parties that could be in a coalition with the DA would possibly increase that to a total of about 34%. So on that basis, does it not, if that is correct, won't we just have a coalition between the ANC and the EFF?
Okay. Do you want me to answer that now? Do you want to?
Well, how about we get to that coalition discussion, because that's one of the questions
Okay.
on the list. So we'll come back to your question.
I promise you I'll answer
Yeah.
it.
Online was a question around coalitions, which we'll get to. I think one more question before we carry on. Suzanne? You wanna?
Yeah, I just wonder, has there been any traction with BOSA and RISE?
Yeah, so again, I look at the opinion polls. And to be honest, it's the first time I've been involved. It's very stressful. Like when you have an idea of where you think the country's going and it doesn't align with your opinion, it's tough. So they are barely featuring in the polls. I think that, I know I live in the northwest suburbs of Johannesburg, on Tyrone Road in Parkview. People speak about RISE, Mzansi, and people obviously know who Musi Maimane is. Musi Maimane was the most successful opposition leader ever. He got 27% for the DA in 2016. But I think it's tough. I think those parties will take votes away from Herman Mashaba, possibly from the DA, possibly some people who voted for the ANC, but it's a very small pool. But I think particularly in the Western Cape, they're going to struggle somewhat, those parties. I think in the Western Cape, RISE will beat BOSA. But politics is hard. I mean, I'll give you a throwaway, and again, I'm going to be eating my words so much, but I promise you the night before the election, I'll refine my prediction.
Don't worry, this is recorded, so we can come back to you later.
I think the most RISE would get is 6 seats, which is, but I mean, that is probably too high. BOSS, I think, will get a bit less. Look, there are, I mean, there was recently a Daily Maverick debate with the BOSSA leader and the RISE Mzansi Premier Canon Gauteng. These are talented individuals. But politics is very, very hard, and I just don't think they're going to reach for the sky as some people might think. Yes, sir.
Michael Graham spoke yesterday, and he discussed the influence of the parliamentary committee system and how important it is. And you cannot, if you're a small party, you cannot possibly attend all the meetings. There are about 40 parliamentary committee meetings per month. So if you give your vote to a small party, they cannot actually input very much to those committees. And it's within those committees that major decisions are taken. So his point was the ANC and the DA and probably IFP will be the only ones who've got enough members to actually attend most of the meetings.
Yes.
Where so much so, by splitting your vote, you are diminishing very substantially the
So before
just
you answer,
yes.
just so that, because there was no microphone, the question for the viewers online, it's about the parliamentary committees where they get together and legislation and other laws are made. And the larger parties, like the ANC and the DA and possibly the IFP, are the only ones that really attend these particular meetings. And the smaller parties that, if they get in, won't be attending the meetings. So to influence a change in legislation, is it worth voting for the smaller parties as opposed to the bigger parties? That's pretty much the gist, yeah?
So, I mean, it's interesting. There should be discussion about that point. That politics, I mean, it's one thing running an election campaign, it's another. The grunt work of Parliament isn't that attractive, and that is important that you have people, and that should be that can be a determination of how you make your decision up, mind up, yes.
Okay, so we'll leave questions for now. If you've got any more, we can come back to it. But I think we have to answer the second burning question. The ANC, we've heard 40%-ish or so. We've heard coalitions. What's going to happen with Cyril?
So if one looks at the trajectory of the ANC, since 2009, it has declined 4 percentage points in each election, 70% to 66, 66 to 62, 62 to 58 in the last election. So if I had a PowerPoint presentation, I was presenting a slide, you'll see it's a very neat line. The reason why the ANC will decline by more than 4 percentage points this time is because the EFF, unlike Bantu Olumisa's UDM and unlike Monsieur Lekoto's, they're both actually still on the ballot. Let me just go over on a quick tangent. You might have heard me say this before. There are currently 14 parties in Parliament. 11 will have the same leaders as 2019. The 3 which won't are the DA, because Musime Mani resigned, and who else will not have the same leader and why? The IFP, why? He died, and the National Freedom Party, she also died. So people don't stand down. I mean, with Bantu Olumisa, it's going to be his 6th consecutive election as the leader of the UDM, the ACDP, his 7th consecutive election. But back to the point. Okay, so the EFF, unlike the UDM and COPE, have stayed intact, largely. And so, therefore, it's very hard for the ANC to win back some of those votes. And then there's the juggernaut, the party which is the reason why I might look so tired to you tonight, is the MK. This is another ANC breakaway. And I think people, and it depends whether MK can continue the momentum they had a few weeks ago, where, I don't know if you remember, there were all those court cases, and which MK won. They haven't won court cases recently. But MK, the sentiment around was real. During the second registration weekend, I promise you I'm answering the question, I made calls across the length and breadth of this country, but it was very, very interesting. Why was I doing this? I wanted to see if you are organized, if you're in a place in a voter registration weekend where all voting stations are open, if you're there on the registration weekend, it's almost 100% chance you'll be there on election day. MK was in all over KwaZulu-Natal. People were energized. People believed in this. And they were in parts of Gauteng and in Mpumalanga as well, and a few other places. So MK was around. And if MK can reach its potential, I mean, some people say it might be up to 15%, but even 8-10%. And a lot of those votes come from the ANC. Without a shadow of a doubt, the ANC will certainly lose much more than 4 percentage points and fall below 50%. I have them currently on 46 to 52%, which is a very unsatisfactory answer. My apologies. But we just do not know. Because can MK hold it together? It's going through a tough time. MK will not, if I don't bore you too much and I get invited in 5 years' time, we won't be speaking about MK. Because Zoom will be 87 years old then. But it is a major factor here and what makes this election so hard to predict. So, with regards to the coalitions.
Before you get there, side question though.
Yes.
You spoke about it. The MK, people have been asking the question. You drive through Joburg, you see 3 billboards in Joburg. And that Joburg, they don't have A4 posters, they've got like billboards. And you drive down the M1 and you see Julius Malema smiling at you. And then you drive down and you see Cyril smiling at you. And then I nearly drove into a ditch because then I saw Jacob Zuma smiling at me. So the question is, wasn't he basically impeached? And now he's running for president again. I mean, how does that even work? How is it even allowed?
So, yes, Lester.
first time really a sense of tribalism in the Natal vote. That the Zulus will vote for MK on a tribal basis.
I paid Lester to ask me that question.
I-
Okay. So I think this is very important.
Do you want to reframe the
You
question?
can rephrase the question.
I
Okay.
actually wasn't listening to Lester. I never
Okay,
really
so
listened to Lester.
Lester was saying, but you should kick me. I mean, you just embarrassed. You like,
No. I listen to. No,
Okay,
that's a
no,
lie.
I'm
I listen
joking,
to
I'm
Lester
joking,
all the time.
I'm
Don't
joking.
worry.
And I'm joking. So Lester's saying, are we seeing tribalism or this strong focus on ethnic attachment and identity return to KwaZulu-Natal politics? So when one looks at Jacob Zuma and the MK, I think there are a few things which an audience in the City Bowl of Cape Town might not appreciate. So let's just take one step back. There have been 3 consequential events in KwaZulu-Natal over the last 2 years. King Goodwill Zwelithini, the Zulu monarch, passed away. And you've seen that since his son has taken over, the monarch has not been the same. The royal house has not been the same. It's let's say it's a time of distress there. Then you had Mangosuthu Buthelezi pass away. This was someone who had led the IFP since inception, very senior in the Zulu family, a real institution. And then the ANC has been a major institution in KwaZulu-Natal. And since Jacob Zuma exited as president, and you had this new leadership elected, which hasn't had the same gravitas as previous provincial leadership, you've seen these 3 major institutes show signs of stress. And in comes, in late December last year, Jacob Zuma and MK. And for many people in KwaZulu-Natal, he is a more authentic, ANC supporters in KwaZulu-Natal, he's a more authentic and better representation of an ANC leader than President Cyril Ramaphosa. They associate him with the values of the ANC, with the history of the ANC, more than Ramaphosa. That's what makes him attractive. But he is also a threat to the Inkatha Freedom Party. Because when he dons traditional attire or sings Zulu songs, he does it much better, or as well, if not better, than the current IFP leadership. And then he's also a big threat to the EFF. The EFF's big growth in the last election in 2019 was in KwaZulu-Natal. That is why they almost doubled their support. They became a national party, but because they're traditionally more in the north of the country, and they grow in KwaZulu-Natal. And he is affecting a lot of EFF because he embodies the values of radical economic transformation as well, if not better, than Jacob Zuma. Than Julius Malema. That was a Freudian slip. Then Julius Malema. And then there are a number of small parties, the National Freedom Party, whose leader passed away, some other local parties, which are also very localized in KwaZulu-Natal. He's taking their support away as well. So this is chaos in the KwaZulu-Natal electoral kraal. And opinion polls have shown him, and the math's very easy, essentially KwaZulu-Natal is 1/5 of the population of the voting bloc in South Africa. So if they get 25% in KZN, that's 5% of the national vote. That is staggering. And then, so we just don't know how far he can go. So if the ANC falls just below 50%, I have a very boring answer to you for those who worry, who wonder whether it's going to be the EFF who will sit in government. The ANC are in coalition in the city I live in with a party called Al-Jama'ah. Al-Jama'ah won less than 1% of the vote in 2021. They have 3 out of 270 seats. They also have the mayoral chain. The mayor of the economic powerhouse of South Africa and Africa comes from a party with 3 out of 270 seats. Did anyone here watch the brilliant documentary called Devilsdorp? Okay. What town was that in? Krugersdorp. Okay, in Krugersdorp there's a party called the African Transformation Movement. I forget the exact seat numbers. I think there's 70 seats. They've got 1 seat. I think they've got 645 votes. My math might be a bit off. But they've got very few votes. They have the mayoral chain. Ekurhuleni, when you land at OR Tambo Airport, more people there, by the way, than the capital city, Tshwane. For many months, there was a mayor, for years, there was a mayor of a party which has 2 out of 224 seats. So why am I giving this boring data? Those parties will reward, if the ANC only needs a bit to get over the line, those are the parties the ANC will go to. Patricia de Lille's Good is another example. They've been a very stable coalition partner over the last 5 years. So I don't see the scenario of the EFF being needed by the ANC or being wanted by the ANC if the ANC just needs to get over the line. What if we get to my range is 46 to 52. In that range of 46 to 52, these small parties are not going to be enough. We spoke about the multi-party charter. What if the multi-party charter isn't needed on a national level, that the idea, the dream just doesn't come into fruition? And the ANC says to the IFP, let's do a deal, and the IFP leaves the multi-party charter. By the way, I think the IFP will be punished by voters in the next election, but I think for the sake of the country, there might be attractive investors that might not mind that outcome because I think they have stable economic policies, pragmatic economic policies. So the IFP is my scenario number 2, then they'll get a few ministerial posts. We've spoken a lot about him. My scenario number 3 is the small parties, bringing them back in the mix, and Gayton McKenzie's Patriotic Alliance. Why do I say that this is a less likely scenario for the ANC? Because Gayton McKenzie is a difficult guy to negotiate with. Him and Kenny Kunene can steal your thunder. The media love them. They can show you up. It will give the ANC a few headaches. Then we start getting into very interesting territory. And there's an idea which a UK investor put to me recently. He said, what if the ANC says... So first of all, think about this pragmatically. In a coalition...
Wait.
Yes.
We haven't got to coalitions.
Okay,
You're jumping the gun.
Oh, okay.
You still didn't answer my question.
But
How's
giving
Jacob
scenarios.
Zuma getting on the ballot again? Did you avoid it or you just don't answer it?
Can I finish with my train of thought? You might.
Fine, go for it.
Okay. So, what about a minority government that the ANC says, look, let's hold on to all the positions and work with the DA on certain legislation, work with the EFF on certain legislation, work with the IFP on certain legislation, work with MK on certain legislation, and then we get to keep all the ministerial positions for ourselves because we'll be hamstrung by working with some of these parties. We just cannot find common ground. And if the NEC of the ANC, there might be some who will say, okay, we'd prefer to work with the DA, but there'll be some who will be wholly opposed to this. There are those in the NEC who'd want nothing more or worse than working with the EFF and Julius Malema. So I want us to think of that minority government idea as a possibly more likely scenario than the ANC doing a deal with the EFF or the DA. What is the least likely scenario I would recommend to the ANC today? Is for them to do a deal with MK and Ace Magashule. Do you remember him, the former Secretary General? By the way, the longest serving ever provincial leader of the ANC is the provincial leader of the Free State for 20 years. That takes some... So whatever you may think of him, it shows that he's got very good survival skills. And why do I say that? Because Jacob Zuma had the opportunity to attend NEC meetings of the ANC a few months ago. And here he comes and forms this political party, takes activists and MPs with him, takes people who've been in the trenches of the ANC, and has stabbed you in the back by challenging you in KwaZulu-Natal, and you're going to reward him with that seat at the table, that I think it would give an encouragement to other ANC people who are disgruntled to break away from the party in the future, and that will bring a potential demise of the ANC. That there could just be, that other people say, if Zuma can do it, if Malema can do it, if Magashule can do it, then I can do it as well. So I think that is the worst possible scenario for the ANC. So back to Zuma. And this is the way I'm going to answer your question. He doesn't want to be in Parliament. So it's like, in a way, an academic discussion. He wants to be at the table at the coalition negotiations. He wants to make sure that he can ensure that his next few years he'll be fine, and that those who've backed him in MK can sit in government positions, possibly in high positions in KwaZulu-Natal as well. I don't think it's immaterial whether he sits in Parliament or not. I think it's extremely unlikely that he'll take his seat in the parliamentary bench. He might be sitting in the top directing things the day after the parliament comes together. Long answer.
No,
Okay.
no, Scott. But was your question, or she answered? Because I think it was about
oh.
the coalitions, about the ANC looks at 40%. You spoke about minority, and you spoke about potential EFF, but what would it take?
So I think there are people like Paul Mashatile, the deputy president, who wouldn't mind a coalition with the EFF. Cyril Ramaphosa doesn't want a coalition with the EFF. I think the Minister of Finance wouldn't want a coalition with the EFF. And again, it's difficult. Julius Malema has that opportunity to stage you up. You do not want a junior coalition partner or a junior business partner to always steal your thunder. And I think that is why the ANC would be reticent of a Gayton McKenzie and certainly of a Julius Malema. But it remains to be seen. But I don't think the ANC are going to be in a position where they're at 41% and the EFF needs to save them. Yes.
At what percentage of the vote does the ANC get when Ramaphosa gets kicked out?
Yeah, I think anything under 46%, 45%, I just don't see. He might remain the president, but look at past history. When people saw Mbeki as a liability, they recalled him. When they saw Zuma as a liability, they recalled him. So like 45.5%, I think he's gone.
So the question there, sorry, for the viewers online, was at what percentage could Cyril Ramaphosa be ousted from the ANC? And that you said about 45%.
Yes. Paul Mashatile. Yes. That's correct. But again, in the 45.5% scenario, maybe you don't need the EFF. I mean, Paul Mashatile will not just. I mean, if you're going to bed with the EFF, you're going to have to give away a lot of coalition ministerial portfolios. So yes, Mashatile is closer to them, but I think it's not a given that he'd immediately do a deal with them. Yes, Adrian.
Okay, so it's a political, historical question. Perhaps you could put into context for us, because I've been listening and it sounds like quite a dance that the ANC is doing, with the alignment and possibly this one and possibly that one. Could you maybe speak to us about the history of the cadre system and the ANC, and do you think that perhaps by having a coalition, are we looking at the unbundling of a cadre system, and how is this going to play out, with the interactions between the parties and all these maneuvers that the ANC seems to be doing? And is that even a real question?
No,
And do you want to repeat a little bit?
So
Maybe
the
just
cadre
explain.
system.
Yeah.
So basically, Adrian asked a question about the cadre system, which is people who have ties to the ANC getting jobs in the civil service. Is that my understanding, the way you see it? Getting.
As it plays out through Parliament as well and through the political system.
So look, the less power you have in a coalition system, the less opportunity you have to just employ your cadres. So this would be a challenge. This is why any party should fear a coalition. The DA are going to fear a coalition in the Western Cape because you cannot run things the way you like to do all the time. You have to consult your junior coalition partners, and this is tough. So I think the current iteration of the cadre system would change if the ANC had to go into a coalition, particularly if it was certainly weak and had to rely on bigger parties.
And it will be interesting to trace that.
Okay. Yeah. I'm going to stick to elections. Okay. Okay. Okay.
What else can you tell us about coalitions? Is there any other information on coalitions? Because that, I think, is what
Look,
a lot
I
of people are
think,
worried about.
it's fascinating. I mean, I remember being on ENCA the day of the election. I said, look, those South Africans who've lived under coalition have had a very poor experience. Not a great experience. They've probably told their family members across the country that coalitions are not that great. And yet, the day after the local government elections, we woke up to many, many more coalitions. And I think, again, I spoke about it earlier, it's about fragmentation. That the idea of the African National Congress in 1994, where you saw a diverse group of South Africans sit not just diverse in race or religion, but in backgrounds, in experience, in how they're involved in the struggle, in their expertise. The Democratic Alliance you saw in 2016, which was very, very diverse, I think has started to fragment, and that's why we're seeing parties like the MK take off. We're seeing parties like the IFP do better, the Freedom Front, the Patriotic Alliance. So that because this idea of a big party with solutions to all our problems is starting to dissipate and fray, I think we are going to enter a time for coalitions for many, many years.
Okay. Lester?
Does a low percentage turnout work for the ANC? And before you answer that,
No or low?
Low.
Low.
there still seems to be a significant number of the black vote who do not believe it's a genuine secret ballot. And they won't vote because they don't want to be seen not to vote for the ANC. That would just reduce the turnout because they're scared to vote for any other party.
So the secret, so are there
Wayne, the
population
question.
groups?
Repeat the question.
Are there population groups where people are scared to vote or scared of voting for another party because they perceive that the vote is not a secret? And then the first question was, does a low turnout favor the ANC? So the second question is a very good question. So again, I said turnout is something I think, and let me state my case. I think Cyril Ramaphosa is less popular today than he was 5 years ago. 5 years ago was a Tumamina moment. There was something called Ramaphoria. I can see it in middle class areas in Gauteng where many people who might not have never voted for the ANC, voted for them on the national ballot. I do not think that those types of voters exist in large numbers anymore. So therefore, I think because if I hold that idea that the ANC doesn't have the energy it had 5 years ago, and the opposition parties have not capitalized on this lack of ANC energy, that turnout should be lower. Again, I go back to KwaZulu-Natal, the province which has 20%, just over 20% of the nation. Because of MK, you're hearing there's this energy in the room, and that might drive turnout. In that scenario, there might be voters who will say, I have to go out and vote for the ANC because I don't want Zuma to come back. So, Lester, it's a very hard question to answer. Typically, lower turnouts do not work well for the ANC. And here I have the data. I just want to give you some astonishing pieces of data very, very quickly. Who's been to the Kruger National Park recently? Okay, so when you go to the Kruger National Park, if you drive there, you leave Nelspruit and Bombela, and just before you get to the southern part of Kruger, there's big townships on your left-hand side, Bushbuck Ridge. It's the 14th most populous place in the country, or the 15th most populous place in the country. The ANC got 81% of the vote there. They smashed it. But you compare Bushbuck Ridge to the city of Johannesburg or the city of Cape Town, turnout was down. There is a place called Malamulele in Limpopo where the ANC got 88% of the vote in 2019, but again, turnout is down. The OR Tambo district, places like Umtata and Labode. Gary's hiked through all of them. That's the last hiking reference, Gary, I promise. These are ANC heartlands. There's no real political competition there, but turnout is down. So can the ANC close the gap? Because for me, the final 13 days are this. Can the ANC turn out these large swaths, these rural areas which have historically been very loyal to the ANC, get them as energized and excited as suburban voters are? And can the opposition parties in the coming 13 days turn on voters who are too afraid to not vote for the ANC or don't want to vote for the ANC and are going to stay away and not transfer their vote to an opposition party? I think that's what the election comes down to. Right now, I think turnout will be slightly down, and I think it will favor the opposition parties more than the ANC. But if they get those rural voters out, and KwaZulu-Natal doesn't have the surge of MK enthusiasm, that can help the ANC. But generally, a lower turnout helps the opposition. So Look, let me first make a very quick statement on voter education. The fact that so many South Africans do not know about the third ballot is very concerning. The IEC have less money than they usually do. And I just hope that people know that you are free to vote. No one should be observing you. This is why we need observers in voting stations to make sure that people vote freely and have the opportunity to vote freely and fairly. And yeah, I mean, just by the way, very interestingly, last night there was a by-election in rural Northwest. In one of the voting stations, the ANC got 100% of the votes, 61 out of 61 votes. So those are astonishing returns. But I would hope that, again, that the observers will make sure that people can vote freely and fairly. Okay.
And I wait, you speak about voter turnout. What does it look like this election compared to last? Well, can you give the data on young votes? Because I think that's been a traditional problem. I know we had, when we did a campaign in the 2021 local elections, it was a major problem that all the political parties said, that young people are not coming out to vote. What does it look like this time around? Are there going to be more young people at the polls?
Yeah, so Michael Barr is going to check my modeling and my math now. But, okay, let me give you some data. In 2009, the voters' roll grew by 13 to 14%. I can't remember the exact number. In 2014, it grew by 10%. That's still pretty high. In 2019, it grew by 5.5%. And Michael, please tell me my reasoning is correct. This time round, guess what it grew by? 3.5%. Oh. So the way I deduce that is that young people simply did not register because they would be the pool you'd expect. So I think that this is a very worrying sign. I think, by the way, the EFF would be upset by that low number because this is a party which can do well amongst younger voters. By the way, the fact that we have, and again, I've spoken about the voters' roll before, it's very unattractive, it's boring to speak on television. It's absolutely key because if you're not on that list, you can't come to the party and you can't vote for your party. So I think that this works against some of the new parties. South Africa is traditionally quite brand conservative, and if you're not bringing new people into the mix, it suits those larger parties which people have voted for in the past. So we didn't see that. The province, let me give you a frightening example. My rugby team, the Free State Cheetahs, the voters' roll is smaller today in the Free State than it was 5 years ago. I mean, it's very concerning data. And why do I think this is happening? I think a lot of South Africans are saying, with such high youth unemployment, with the bad job numbers we've just had, that what's the point of voting? And that's sad. There's a great point in voting. Voting can be extremely powerful, and I hope that that can be rectified by the next election.
But then that's a case to bring up with future elections, is to see what we can do within the schools, for example, to educate. Because if I'm not mistaken, I had a conversation with a young person at UCT, not UCT, he's in matric at one of the schools, sorry, and he didn't register. Now he turns 18 on the 29th of May. And now he didn't go and register because he thought, well, I'm not 18, I can't register and I can't vote. But actually, isn't the registration age from about 17?
Yeah, he shouldn't get any birthday presents. Okay, okay. Okay.
Can I come back to my question? I think if the young voting numbers had increased from 3.5% to say 10 or 12, that would be extremely bad news for the ANC.
Correct. So the question is, if the voter registration had grown by 10 to 12%, that would be bad for the ANC. I agree. I mean, you can just see that younger voters are are not as bound as their parents or grandparents are, and that generally wouldn't be good for incumbents, whether it's the ANC or the DA, or a party like the IFP. I think it would be. So that is a very good point. But just one of the things which will be interesting after this parliament is that you're going to see a lot of young people. The ANC and the DA have many young candidates, and maybe they'll be able to inspire young people to participate in the next round. But it's key. It's a very important point you made, Lester. Yes.
At the last election, they had this thing where people were voting, let's say, I think you mentioned earlier, that voted was a national, but they voted differently provincially. That may not take place this election, but how nuanced are voting terms of provincial versus national? And what
Yes, so first of all, just remember, if you're voting overseas, you're only getting one ballot. If you are voting out of your province, you're only getting one ballot. So we're always going to have more national, does it make sense? More national votes than provincial votes. So the highest ever differentiation for the ANC was Cyril Ramaphosa in the last election, where I think it was 6.4 or 7%. I can't remember the exact number. So the ANC got 6.4 to 7% more, let's just call it 6.5%, more votes on the national ballot than the provincial ballot. That is absolutely massive. And in Zuma's time, it was about 4% difference. In Becky's time, it was closer. By the way, the political leader who got the closest in parity was Helen Zille. In 2014, there was only a 10,000 vote difference between the combined DA provincial ballot total and the national ballot total. I mean, I think with the three ballots, we might see some ballot splitting in this particular election, but it's something we're going to watch very, very carefully. But generally, there's not major differences. But we saw it in the last election of Ramaphosa, certainly.
I don't know if there are any other questions in the audience. So I think, Wayne, you've given us a lot of incredible information. I know you're speaking again in Joburg on Sunday. Our national board's having an election in Durban. Wayne, I know you're one of the speakers. Then you're speaking on, I think, a Jewish report. And then you're going to the ENCA. Is there any different information you're going to give them? Or are we, like in Cape Town, we're the first to get your insight?
You're getting the master class because I've been in conversation with you. Just maybe, yeah, I think, again, the three unknowns are MK, the PA, and what voter turnout is going to be. I think social media can be... I have to go... I spend time on Twitter just to see what the major... where people are campaigning, etc. It's very, very hard to predict what the turnout's going to be. I think these are the unknowns. And again, just don't discount that. My four fundamentals, what I've seen in trends, and I'll conclude with this, is that I've said that the DA have its challenge in the Western Cape mainly because of Gate and Mackenzie. I've spoken about the chaos in KwaZulu-Natal. And again, we just don't know whether Zuma... and when the next, because I know many books have been written on him, including the late, great Jeremy Gordon, who wrote a book on him. I think this is a big part of his legacy the next 13 days. And those who care about him and his legacy will want to make sure that he holds MK together and they get to that election day well organized, because it seems like in a disarray right now. The third thing, which I didn't speak about much, I will speak a lot more on Sunday certainly, is that when I look at by-election trends, the ANC is in big trouble with black voters in Gauteng. And they have rolled out all their Thabo Mbeki, Toko Sexwali. They've had a very enthusiastic premier. Is that going to turn their loss in support around in the coming days? And the fourth one, and I've touched on it, is this ANC the rural firewall. I think this is quite remarkable. 90% of the vote in Toyandu, 80% of the vote in many rural areas, places where we do not ordinarily focus on. Like, these are the four things I want to watch in the coming days. So I think that will really give us an indication of what will happen. And just another final point is weather. I mean, up until... Like, we in Gauteng have been blessed by incredible weather. What happens if you guys have the mother of all storms on election day? And that's correct. That is correct. And Gauteng has a beautiful hot day, or Limpopo has a beautiful hot day. So a lot of variables, a lot to keep me up at night. But I hope that this will be better than what Johannesburg is going to get.
Well, you're not done yet. I've got to ask you an opinion on something.
Sure.
This coming Sunday, the Cape Board's partnered with ENCA. We're going to be hosting a provincial election debate live on ENCA, 5:30 to 7 o'clock. Professor J.J. Tabane is hosting the discussion. We've got 5 of the top parties in the Western Cape. We've got Alan Windey as the Premier-elect for the DA. You've got Patricia de Lille as the Premier-elect for Good. You've got Dr. Corne Mulder from the Freedom Front Plus, Ferland Christians from the ACDP, and then Khalid Syed, who's the Premier-elect for the ANC. And that JJ is going to be talking about things like the economy, job creation. How do you see a debate of that kind panning out?
Let's go bring your
Cut.
So first of all, well done. I think it's great that the Jewish Community Center is hosting probably one of the last premier debates. We need more debates and discussions where candidates for office are put under scrutiny. I'm often quite critical of debates because if people shout down people who speaking or trying to make a point, or often they shout down people, they save people by shouting to like prevent someone giving a bad answer. So I think it's very, very good that you're doing the debate and probe the candidates. This is consequential. Those are 5 significant people, and I wish I was here for it.
Great. Well, you can still cancel Joe, but you can come to us.
Okay.
That's fine. So anyway, Wayne, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure having you here, as always, and we look forward to more of your insights in the coming, 13 days. And then when do they announce the final outcome of the elections? What's the actual date?
So if I don't answer your call at 5 o'clock in the morning on Thursday, don't take it personally, because I probably won't be answering people's calls, including my wife. My wife.
Your wives.
Okay.
We spoke about that where someone was on TV talking about they try to reach out to their wife, their mother, their friend, their girlfriend, their aunt.
My
Don't make
in-laws
that
are in
mistake.
Cape Town. They can check on me. I've only got one wife. So I think the vote count is going to be slower this time. It has to be because of the 3 ballots. By the way, they've employed like bank tellers to like help count votes. I mean, I don't know how they're going to roll that out nationally, but I mean, they have been creative in trying to like speed up the process. But yeah, I'm going on air at 5 o'clock in the morning the day after the election, and hopefully, like I'll give you an example. In the local government elections, we saw a major theme develop at 2:30 in the morning, that the ANC had lost huge support in the deindustrializing heartland, like places like Sasolburg, Vanderbijl Park. So I'm hoping that I think it'll take longer. By like 7 o'clock, we'll start seeing some themes develop. It's going to be very exciting. If anyone's counting votes, you're allowed to WhatsApp me, because I'd love to know what the vote results are, because I can deduce information from that. But it's going to be a very busy few days, and by Saturday, the results will be proclaimed.
Yeah. So I know that the South African Jewish Board of Deputies has got a program, the Make Us Count Observer program. We've got people in Gauteng, the Western Cape, actually all over, that are going to be part of the Observer campaign. I don't think I'm going to be counting votes, but I'm going to be one of the stations just observing things. So I think that's our way as the board of getting involved, making a difference, contribution, educating the community. So
Just on that, because I know people want to go eat, but just counting votes is one of the most exhilarating things you can do. I mean, even as long as you know what happened in that voting station before, it's fascinating, because you're literally seeing a community make its decision, and you can see shifts. So if there's still an opportunity to count votes, I highly recommend it. You're going to get to sleep very late, but it is like a World Cup final. This only happens once every 4-5 years. I highly recommend it. And be an observer as well.
great. Well, Wayne, thank you very much.
Thank you.
To everybody online. To everybody online, thank you for joining us. The recording will be on our Facebook page and on YouTube. To everybody in the audience, thank you very much for all your input. I think a lot of good questions. Wayne, travel safe. Everybody finish the food and drive home safe. That's a wrap. Thanks.